Morning all. I have quite an interesting game for you to have a look at. From Tata Steel round 5, Pentala Harikrishna was playing white against Van Wely. So E4 was played by Pentala. Van Wely plays the Sicilian defence, an opening which I'm keen on trying myself recently. So knight f3, can black generate some counterplay for a fun, exciting game? E6, and we see now D4, none of this anti-Sicilian stuff. It looks like a normal plain Sicilian, giving black that classic semi-open C file. White's got the semi-open D file pressure. A6, bishop E2, and we transpose it into what looks like a normal Scheveningen variation with this centre here. This Najdorf A6 move, good preventative move for things like bishop B5 sometimes, and also preparing later B5, bishop B7 to put pressure on the centre. If white doesn't stop that with move A4, that's a viable classical option for white to try and stop black's counterplay like that. And we see now after castling that okay, can black play B5 straight away? Is that actually a threat here, or does black want to continue developing and safely castle? Black wants to continue developing and safely castle for the moment, no tactical surprises. But here B5, is it worth ruling it out? The player with white, Harikrishna, felt it was worth it. Pentala plays A4. Okay, and you might think, is this system for white a little bit on the passive side, or will it be aggressive later? Okay, knight C6, bishop E3, black castles, and now a little bit of aggression with F4. So it looks as though F5 might be on the cards, but what about this diagonal? Is it potentially weak? Does white want to invest a bit of a prophylaxis against the sensitivity of this diagonal? In fact, after queen C7, we see the move king H1, bit of prophylaxis. And okay, for the moment, rook E8, and we see bishop F3, white reinforcing this critical E4 square. And the bishop from here can actually be used to kind of virtually fianchetto sometimes. If it slips back after a G3 or G4 move, it can slip back, so it's as though it's fianchettoed. Bishop D7, and we see actually white now playing knight B3, as though quite content potentially to play A5 and bishop B6 maybe. And against this, black maybe doesn't want A5 in this lock on the queen side. Van Wely plays B6, so he can answer A5 with either maybe taking or just B5, with at least a pawn on B5 there, which could support the C4 square, a knight outpost for example on C4. White's not interested in playing A5, it's losing a pawn here anyway to B takes. He plays on the king's side. He's got this bind on B5 and D5 at the moment, so his position is quite stable for this next move, which looks very, very aggressive. G4, but it's pretty standard. I think this has occurred quite a few times before, perhaps even this exact position. White's gaining space on the king side, driving back defensive pieces, creating potential soft spot issues with, say, H7. And you might think, how is it possible for white to gang up on H7 here, even if this knight's driven back? Okay, let's see. Black actually redeploys the bishop across this diagonal. Now that this weakness has been created, you might think this diagonal is more sensitive, and the king's not going to be as comfortable with this bishop pointing down this diagonal. Okay, white gains space anyway with tempo G5, and now bishop G2, and then we see bishop B7, so there could be some potential problems in this diagonal. There could be potentially an outburst of queenside counterplay. There was a classic Karpov-Kasparov game in this similar sort of position, where Kasparov built up prophylaxis with two rooks here behind the e-pawn just to try and discourage F5, and later created lots of play sacrificing B6, and Karpov was actually destroyed. Very dramatic game. Probably time pressure had something to do with it, but Kasparov really created tons of counterplay in that game, and it was felt as though Karpov was playing outside of his comfort zone. With the white pieces here, This next move is highly committal for a kind of soft spot based attack to go for h7. Even though theoretically it looks as though, well, black can just put a knight on f8 and defend it. Is that going to be an issue for black? Well, white goes for it anyway. He goes for rook f3. He's heading for that soft spot. He drove that defensive classical positioned knight away from the soft spot. More defensive knight on f8. But no, actually, black also wants to optimize this bishop to kind of marry with this bishop across this diagonal. And he can still later maybe play for knight f8. For the moment, he plays bishop f8. His intention is g6, bishop g7. So potentially he's got two nice bishops across both diagonals complementing each other. And he can still play knight f8 and it looks quite rosy. Or is there a downside to this whole plan here? White's very crude. White plays rook h3. So queen h5 on the cards. That can be ruled out immediately with g6 though. But the queen can still use h4 maybe. So queen e1 looks logical. Go to h4. Attack the soft spot. Bishop g7, queen h4, knight f8 just in time. Okay, what's the big deal here? Okay, one slight weakness of the last move. This little thing, this b6 pawn is probed with queen f2, teasing black. Do you want to go back with the knight? Yes, do want to go back with the knight. No other way of really defending b6 there. Okay, it's important to keep b6 because otherwise then after taking even a5 there's a clear pawn up, can win on the queen side. So rook f1, keeping in reserve the toying move queen h4 to drive the knight back, unless black wants to play some sort of weird pawn sec. Queen h4 is now a latent threat, just held in reserve, as well as tying the knight down to b6, the knight and queen tied down to this b6 pawn at the moment. Okay, can black generate some counterplay? We see the move knight b4, a slight weakness of the last move. The knight's not on d4. White taps into this with this next move, bishop d4, challenging this bishop. Black doesn't really want to play e5. He'll be wrecking d5 control a little bit, and also tactically it would seem f7 would be another soft spot targeted there. If the knight ever took, then there's still bishop takes b6, and if pawn takes, then queen takes f7. So e5 looks out of the question. Does black want to weaken his king with bishop takes d4? Okay, doesn't that leave fatally weak, potentially fatally weak, dark square weaknesses if black wants to take on d4 here? Well, he decides that is playable here. Bishop takes d4. So I think felt this position was okay in the post-game interview. Okay, at this moment, knight c6. Challenging the knight. Okay, and white doesn't actually now mind simplification potentially with f5. Or is there time to play knight takes d4? It might actually be ruled out. White doesn't have to recapture automatically. White, after knight takes d4, might consider f takes g6, leaving huge threats of mating black. Knight d4 might actually be totally unplayable here. So in fact the key priority now is to, as an emergency, defend the f7 soft spot. On e takes, that's horrendous as well. Knight d5 with tempo on the queen. So actually knight c e5 holds things together, it seems. Holding up f7, getting a juicy knight outpost on e5, showing some weaknesses maybe of white's dark squares. We see now queen h4 now. Now this is with a big difference with a pawn on f5, because knight f8 could be answered with f6, and then we have queen h6 almost mating, or in fact mating on g7. So black has to use the other method of defending the soft spot, the temporary kind of pawn sack, h5. Okay, now if it's taken here, then black does have this big knight on e5, and it might not be so bad. Black also has e takes and can try and expose the weaknesses of this diagonal with e takes. So white's rook would also be potentially slightly misplaced. So does white really want to play g takes h6 in this position? Another method might be to try and crack this structure by trying to say sacrifice on h5. And I think this next move portrays that intention. Better to try and not give black too much to work with on this diagonal, blocking this attack with one's own pawn. That would be a defensive pawn, which black would like if I had a pawn on h6. So this next move, knight d e2, reveals the intention that maybe, you know, holding up e4 using this knight just to go here or here would attack h5, and that would be quite dangerous for black. Okay, e takes f5. Black's trying to get the counterplay across this diagonal. Knight f4. White's trying to just smash black with knight takes h5. Van Wely tries to prepare for this with king g7. Okay, and in this position, if knight takes h5, maybe just taking queen takes, we have rook h8, forwarded by that king g7. White now shifts attention to the d5 square, another slight weakness of e takes f5, by playing knight c d5, attacking the queen. We have takes, takes. Okay, the queen's attacked, and c2 is being offered here. Is it a poisoned pawn or something? It is taken. E takes f. Okay, rook ac8, and the knight, this knight returns to carry on this job of maybe playing for knight takes h5, or simply something else, maybe fg and something else. It looks quite dangerous here for black. Maybe f6 first, then knight takes h5. So black's a bit cautious about this h5 sack, and maybe this next move, rook h8, shows that. But it's not just the h file, it's the f file here. This f pawn advance could open up the f file. There's a potential soft spot target on f7 in this position. We see now a forcing move, f takes g. F takes g allows, unfortunately, knight e6 check for black. And this is getting really quite dangerous. After king g8, this rook is like a prisoner, disconnected rooks. And also now, white has an aggressive move, which almost looks as though it would have been a check if the piece wasn't on a particular square. Can you see it? White to play. Very, very, very dangerous move. Available now in this position. If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, white plays bishop d5. And at this point, Van Wely might be thinking, I wish I should have played a French defence, not a Sicilian defence. Why can't I just play the French defence? It'd be more solid. Okay, well, maybe. That was a little bit of a joke. So here, queen d2, attacking the bishop, trying to parry this potential check. We have to consider, for example, is black really surviving this after, say, knight d4? Doesn't that shield the check? Or what does black actually do there? Maybe king g7, it's no big deal. Because the knight is covering f7 square. So after king g7 there isn't, maybe it isn't so bad. Okay, but white in this position plays now queen e4, reinforcing that bishop, so keeping that knight there. No need to shield the bishop, it can just be protected. And there's useful forcing move pressure on g6 here. So you might think a move like rook f6, but what about this back row? White's got to be careful about his back row. And in fact, this next move by black looks as though there's a bit of a counter-attack going on. This rook can't naturally come back to the game. This knight's perhaps stopping it, or is it tied down to this? Okay, but this rook looks as though it might be potentially misplaced, but on the other hand, look at that one. So both sides have got embarrassing rooks here. So in this position, in fact, this knight is only pretending to control the f3 square, because we've got that pressure on g6 here. So this next move does help white's first row. White plays rook h to f3, maintaining that first row, and also very serious other threats potentially are on the cards here. And after king h7, we see a fantastic move now from white. A combination, actually. I hope you can spot both moves, the first and second move here. So white to play in this position. Pentala plays a brilliant move in this position, which you might think initially is absurd. Remember, this rook is pinned, so be careful. Can you really use the f7 square? That's a clue, or maybe I'm trying to put you off something which you shouldn't be put off. It's up to you to decide that. What would you play here with white? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, white does play rook f7. It's got nothing to do with playing rook f7 again. It is taken. Of course the rook's pinned. But there's a brilliant move now in this position. A brilliant forcing move, which I think maybe even a computer back in 1970 would be able to work out after a minute or two, let alone today in a nanosecond. So can you spot it? Okay, brilliant move coming up. Forcing moves, think of forcing moves. Okay, queen takes g6 check. Ouch. King's forced to take. He resigns here. He's forced to take, and it's a mate. Look at that. It's a mate. The knight is stopping g7. King can't go back. The pawn stopping h6. The knight is protecting the pawn. Ouch. Checkmate. I bet he wished he played the French defence after this game. So anyway, let's have a look at the game again from a more technical point of view. So those of you not interested in technical details, I hope you enjoyed that first pass, got something from it. Those of you who want to see the details about the opening, okay, bear with me. So let's go into this. E6, okay, it's a way of just heading for the Sicilian Scheveningen position. So it looks like it's all classically been played before. You might think, okay, one question here about b5. Is it premature in principle to play b5? Has it been played before? Let's just do a quick reference check for those interested here. Okay. The most popular move by far is bishop e7, 5,169 games. Queen c7, about 1,128 games, over 1,000 games. Knight b7, 485, b5, 308. Hasn't. Okay, so bishop e7. Let's go a little bit further. a4 now. It's the way white wants to play with a4. Surely in this system, I would have thought, but no. Actually, you can. f4 is actually the more popular move here. Letting black play for b5. f4 has been played by Karpov, Anand, Ivanchuk, Movsian in this position. I've got 2,720 games here with f4. 1,699 with bishop e3. a4, 851. It's been played by Anand, Kasparov, Carlsen and Adams. Move a4 here. Okay, so knight c6. That's the second most popular move. Castling is the most popular, 841. Knight c6, 458 times before. So we see bishop e3, the most popular, 623 games rather. King h1, 130 games. Knight coming back to b3, 38 games. So that's the most popular. I assume castles is like the default move here. Yes, most of the games castling. The knight coming back now to b3 is not playing the game. Sorry, f4 is played in the game, which is the most popular in this position. Over 1,000 games. Anand, Kasparov, Kramnik, Carlsen have all played f4 in this position. King h1, 240 games. So f4 was the move played. Queen c7. It looks like a very logical move to try and control e5. If nothing else against e5 or knight c6 and e5. Queen c7. Other moves don't bear thinking about here. King h1, a bit of prophylaxis. Is it that popular? Yes, it's the most popular move. King h1, 2,366 games in this position. Retreating the knight, 415. So we see rook e8 here. That is the most popular move. 2,909 games. Bishop d7, second most popular, 851. Bishop f3, most popular. Okay, let's go on a bit. Bishop d7, third most popular. Often played is rook ab8. Kasparov, Anand, Ivanchuk, Kramnik all played rook ab8 here. 678 games. Putting the bishop on f8, 316 games. Bishop d7, 288. So we see bishop d7, knight b3, the most popular move here. What is black actually threatening? Black might be threatening knight a5 here. Maybe knight b3 is against knight a5 potentially as well. So knight b3 is the most popular, 255 games here to play knight b3. Black playing b6, I think the threat is a5 now, if we look at the threat a5. So b6 is absolutely logical and the most played move here. 183 games. Kasparov, Topalov, Movsian all played this before. So, sorry, b6. Now g4, is this the way to play it? It's the theory move, it's the most beaten track, 148 games. Players have played g4 here, Anand, Grischuk, Scheveningen, Almalzi. It's all been played before. So g4 here. Queen e2, 35 games. So g4 is the top popular move. Bishop c8 is the top popular reply to try and maybe exploit this diagonal. g5, most popular top move. Knight goes to d7. Bishop goes to g2. It's all been played before, 143 games. It's all theory. Bishop b7, or rather beaten track territory. Now here, queen h5 is slightly more popular on my database, 52 games, compared to rook f3, which is 37 games. So a slight deviation, rook f3, interrupting the queen going to h5 for a moment. And we see bishop f8, which is the most popular, and also g6, 11 games, 14 games with bishop f8. Rook h3, 16 games along this path. g6, now the move queen e1, most popular, 8 games, 10 games. Jakovenko, who have had this exact position with queen e1. Queen d2 less popular, so queen coming to that h4. Bishop g7, you'd think is entirely logical, but actually 7 games have seen knight b4 here. Van Wely has actually played knight b4 himself before in a game against Jakovenko in 2008, which he lost in that game. Okay, Jakovenko was 27-11 at that time. So Van Wely's played knight b4 here in the past. In this game he tries bishop g7, 3 games in bishop g7. So okay, queen h4, 3 games, the 3 games carry on here, and the move queen f2, 2 games from this position, queen f2. f5 has been played in this position 5 times before. So queen f2 twice before, getting that knight back must be the only option for black, to d7 to protect b6. Now we see rook f1. So rook f1, and I think I'm out of reference, coming out of reference here, no games found. So now we've got so move 22. We can say that white's got an interesting attacking position to start off with. We see knight b4, bishop d4. Is that the most accurate? f5 is also, from an engine point of view, tempting, offering up this bishop. So let's say f5. G takes, e takes, bishop g2, king g2. If black was taking here, it looks dangerous in principle. Knight d5. It looks okay for white. It looks dangerous. It looks pretty dangerous. This looks absolutely dangerous, but black, yeah, I don't know. You'd have to have some nerve to play this. But in the game, okay, bishop d4 was played. So we see bishop takes, knight takes, quite slightly better. Knight c6, and now going in with the f5. Maybe knight c6 looks a tiny bit of possibly it's an inaccuracy. Maybe knight f8 is okay now. There isn't such an issue with b6. Knight f8 might be okay. For example, f5 here. Actually, it looks pretty grim to me. If black has to play e5, and white's got a nice control of d5. So I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced either way. So knight c6, f5 looks pretty dangerous for black in any case. Knight ce5. So white plays queen h4. It looks like a strong position for white. There's an advantage here. h5. Now white wasn't tempted with g takes, although the engine likes it. So g takes, it looks intuitively from human eyes just to block the attack. But is it just the material? I think the attacking personality has gone from the position, or not. From an engine point of view, this seems something is suspect here. It might be the e6 pressure. For example, let's take here e takes, bishop takes, rook takes, e takes, knight takes, rook g8. It looks crushing. This looks, apparently it's getting to be crushing. Okay, yeah, this pawn is pretty dangerous as an attacking resource. So maybe, in fact, technically it seems this is a little bit of a bluff defense, that maybe g takes h6 technically what was the best move in this position. Let's just quickly check this again. What is actually what is actually black's threat? Why is rook g3 key here? Black might be threatening e takes and for this bishop, so getting the rook back to protect the bishop against e5, e takes f and bishop g2 is important. And the attack really is still dangerous now because of the e6 pressure, because of queen h3. So queen h3 coming up, f takes, and then at some point queen h3, put pressure on e6. It looks a bit of a menace, this position. And in fact, on knight f8, there's an intriguing idea here of not maybe black's going to play knight h7 or something. h7, what is this about? If that was taken, the engines lap up these positions, these technical positions. Knight e6 might be good. It mentioned knight e6, but even stronger, queen h6. And threats, I guess, is rook h3 or f6. Rook h3. And here, f6 in this position. And this is looking diabolical. So, okay, so this is a little bit, potentially this is a little bit of a bluff, but tiptoed across, and now black, technically, from an engine point of view, actually, black seems to be doing okay, technically, at this depth. If we give it more time to think, maybe it's not so hot, because there's sacrifices on the cards here. So we see e takes f, and it's gone to equal after e takes f suddenly. So maybe it wasn't so hot for black because it's now seeing the power of these sacrifices. I don't know. King g7. F takes e4 is liked here. It looks really asking for it, this engine move. And I saw this yesterday on the chess bomb site. I thought, really? Can really you want the F file and the H file open against your king like this? Can you really survive this? Surely it's an illusion, this evaluation. If we give it more time, we're only at depth 13, but is black not getting slaughtered? I mean, that's the question here. Queen h8, it's thinking about g7 there, rook g6, check. Things are brewing here for queen h8. And you might think, well, what about just taking? Isn't that dangerous for queen h8? If we take, for example, rook f6, getting behind the pawn, and black threatens to be better. This check is harmless now. I suppose king e7. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, maybe the engine must be right in very tactical positions. I think the engines are absolutely right. They've got all the evidence to suggest that a move like f takes e4 is not as bad as it seems. Inviting knight takes h5, Seems crazy. And then to play the move, then to follow up with the quiet move King F8. So white's threatening mate in 1, so the king helps itself with King F8 to avoid the mate in 1. And yeah, I mean, quick Queen H7, Rook E6 apparently. And it's black getting back in the game, Queen C4. Okay, let's go past that. In the game, in this position we see King G7. Now we see Knight CD5, and white is actually enjoying an advantage now again here. Queen takes C2, and it starts to be pretty dangerous for black's king being blown away. Isn't the king a fun piece to have in chess? You have to worry about it all the time, even if you've castled. Okay, so Knight F4. Looks as though Knight takes H5 is the clear threat here. And on any defence like Rook H8, we've got F6 surely in any case. So it is pretty serious threat, just taking in conjunction with this pawn on F5. So black's seemingly parrying that, but look at this. Whoa, very dangerous. FG, and we see this forcing move, check, and another virtually forcing move, menacing bishop D5. How can black attack that bishop to stop the check? Can't use F6 here. Can try and attack bishop with the queen was what he did. We might think Knight D4, is that absolutely poxy? The strong move which was played, Queen E4, is what the engine really likes here. Queen E4. Knight D4 probably doesn't achieve anything. It's just equal. What is white doing now? It just pins the knight. It's gone into a self pin, and it's okay. You can play bishop E4 because of the bishop G6 tactic. Okay, but it's no big deal. There was actually a threat here of Queen H5 as well. So Queen D4, bishop G6 wins that queen, but it's no big deal. Apparently, King G7. So anyway, so in this position, the knight wants to stay where it is, just nicely installed. Just protect that bishop with the queen, and other forcing moves now. Black's position, I guess after Rook C1 we see a +5. Rook H7 we see a horrible position as well. If Rook H7 was tried, okay, a lot of good technical moves now coming up. Just the ordinary check here, discovered check, and there's a brutal move here, Rook D3, just to kick that queen away. I guess black doesn't want to take this under any circumstances. Actually, mate in 3 with check here, and a similar pattern to the game on that diagonal. That's mate there. So if the queen gets evicted, say here, then again check. Can afford to take here. And what's white's threat here? Bishop E4. So this looks horrendous as well. Actually, let's go back to this position. Queen F5. Okay, better than the game. Much better than the game, because the game black was getting mated. Black's living another day basically. So it is better than the game apparently. In this position, it seems to be the case that Rook C1 didn't help black at all, but Rook H7 might have helped black a little bit to play Rook H7 here. So Rook C1, okay, we see this crushing move which the engine absolutely approves of, Rook HF3. And what's the actual major threat? The actual threat now is Queen takes G6. Wow, let's just see this continuation. Let's give black a token move to see it. So Queen takes G6, Knight D4 check, Rook F7, and Rook takes D7 is mate. There's trouble in this position. So we see Van Wely trying king h7, and we've actually got two mates in free, either rook f7 or queen g6, even straight away. Queen g6 straight away. On knight takes, there's check, and rook g7 is mate here. And on king takes, there's mate here, like the game. So the other way is to play in the game. Rook f7 is also a forced mate. On king g8, there's rook g7's mate again. Clearly, so okay, so nice queen sack to finish the game. Mate in 2. It's just a mate in 2. Queen takes g6 and bishop e4. So an argument for not playing the Sicilian defence. Okay, what can you play with black? Everything requires precision. Chess is a brutal game. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.